Okay, so now what we're doing is we're going to be going over this memo that we created with the pupil array class. However, now we're just going to go into more detail, as well as learn a couple of new things that I've kind of skipped. The first thing is obviously here are your fields, and to determine something as an array, it's easy enough. You just put square brackets after the data type. Not ironically, I don't know if it's ironic, but it can be placed either way. I would suggest you just stick to one rule. So it could be placed after the data type, or it could be replaced after the name you give. Obviously not both. But so there you're actually dictating that it's an array by saying it's square brackets, and then you initialize it by saying new, the same data type, and the square brackets. Now, remember I've told you before that string is actually a class. It's not. If you guys actually press Control and click on string, you'll see it will take you to the basic structure of the string class. They don't release all the code and how it works, etc., but they do give you a basic idea. The fact that it's a class with various different methods, and all of that is listed there. You will also see in your API documentation, all these methods do have API documentation. So when you do refer to string, so for example, if I'm referring to name here, and I go name dot, you'll see that every single item that I work to, it will come up with an explanation under it. And this is API documentation. And that's one of the things I'm just going to show you briefly today, is a bit on the API documentation, as well as more understanding of the fact that this is a class. We're going to work through that. Okay, so ideally here we've created a text-based interface as well as a class. And in our text-based interface, we use the constructor to create an instance of the class. Because here you declare it, and then when you initialize it, the purpose of a constructor is to completely initialize that field. Now, good programming practice is to separate your working code from your user interface. In this scenario, because we haven't learned how to read from text files and how to parse arrays and etc., 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 what we're doing is we actually have got a user interface inside our entity class. Because here we're asking the user to input the names of the subjects, and here we're asking them to input the marks of the subjects. That's not so good. The biggest thing that you need to learn here is I'm doing this now out of necessity, because we don't want to make it too complicated. So we're literally asking the users to input the subjects as we get it. So we're not going to read from a text file. Normally what you'll do is you read it from a storage area, and then what you'll do is when the user adds it, you'll add it to the array, and you'll add it to the storage area for use in the future. So it would combinate the pupils. It wouldn't work like this. But for now, every time you run it, you just have to enter in the pupils and the items along there. Now, again, you'll see here, they underline this yellow. And yellows are just simply suggestions, like it is here. It talks about field name can be final. And why it says that is because I did not create the setters and getters for this field name, meaning that once the constructor has set it, it cannot be changed. So, final, if I say final, well, I think it's with a small f. Yeah. If I say final, it means once it exists, it cannot be changed. And it suggests to me it can be final because it's private, it's not accessible from anywhere else. So for example, in my text-based interface, when I refer to pupil, P in this case, P dot, you'll see there I can't access name at all, can I? I can't get it and I can't change it. So that means it's suggesting to me, it's saying, no matter what, no one's going to be able to change this, so you might as well make it final. It just makes more sense. But ideally, what I should have probably done is created, remember, alt insert is your shortcut. I should have probably created my getters and setters for my name, for argument's sake. So I should have actually created that. And then you'll see that it takes away that yellow underline saying it's suggested that you make this final. And same thing goes with your subjects. I can't change it, so you can make it final. That kind of thing. Am I making sense here? So that kind of introduces you to the terminology final. You're not going to be using that this term, but well, potentially not going to, I don't know. But now, another nuance, these things are just suggestions, and sometimes I would suggest ignoring them. In other words, to click them and to let them do stuff and to all of a sudden change their stuff that they're doing, you could mess up your whole program. unless you understand what it's suggesting. I wouldn't do it, because it can destroy your or change your program to not function the way it's intended. And one of the reasons why this is underlined is because, okay, yeah, never mind, just ignore it. Okay, I'm not going to go into the explanation of that, otherwise it's going to get confusing. Okay, so when you deal with arrays, the most common thing you do is you loop through an array, and a for loop allows us to loop a predetermined number of times. So in this case, it will loop from 0 until position. No, not subject.length. It will be one position before subject.length. Now, the subject.length is 7, right? Because the length of subjects is 7. So if it says while I is less than subject.length, as soon as it will exit when it becomes 7, so it will never loop the 7th. But it will loop 7 times, but 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sorry, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You see, so it's looped 7 times, but that's the 7th loop is 6, is number 6. Does this make sense? Okay, so this will loop through each position in the array. And remember, what was the shortcut for this? For our tab, and that creates you a nice for loop with the starting position, where it should stop, and what. Now, first question: what if you took 8 subjects? You're doomed. Okay, you're doomed. Well, you have to make the array bigger. So yes, you'd have to make the array bigger. But now, what if you have, for example, drama? You take as a 7, 8 subject, plus you're doing AP, so you have 9 subjects, etc. So you don't want to predetermine this as drastically as saying you are only allowed to take 7 subjects. You want to allow it for more variable length. Now, for the most part, that's where lists come into it. Remember, I've explained to you before the way lists work by using Excel, and I'm going to do that again. But please note, lists are not examinable up at matric level. Only in university will you ever deal with lists. And the way an array works, an array will have positions. I'm only going to have an array of size 4. Do you guys get that this is an array of size 4? And it would have pointers. So it would say memory G5 contains the array position 0. So if this is, for example, my marks, so this is my marks array, and G5 contains it. Then G5 would contain mark 70. And then position 1, I would then, once I initialize it, I would then say, okay, this is stored in M3, sorry. And that would then store mark 60, or whatever it is. Does this make sense? So that is how an array works. Now, the way a list would work is, instead of having an array like that, it would actually have a situation where okay, so you'd have a marks, and what it would do is it would say the starting position, and it would put there G5, and then potentially it would store information like size. So let's say if it said 4, and what happened there is in G5 would store 70 as well as the pointer to M3, and then M3 would contain 65 as well as the pointer to J7, which then would contain 80. You guys get the idea. So each position in the list will refer to the next position in the list, and your actual main, your actual array or your list declaration, or whatever you called your list, would just contain the start position as well as the size of it. Does that make sense? And then from there, you would never be able to access the third position directly. So it's more of a sequential accessing of it, because now you would have to loop through the first to get the second memory location. You have to get from the second to the third. So you can't from one spot determine the spot, which then makes algorithms much more complex, which is why it is not used at high school. In your guys' projects, you can use something called an Arraylist, which is a class created by Java or Sun Microsystems or whoever, which makes your life easier in using a list. It allows you to use a list like an array. You don't have to worry about the complex algorithms. So at a university stage, you would not be allowed to use that, because that then is you meant to understand the concepts rather than just exercise your brain. Anyway, so the way we solve it at a high school level, we want to take more than 7 subjects. So what we do is we create a pointers. Let's say we create a pointers up to so here we've got 10 subjects. Does that make sense? But now what if someone's only part-time and they only do 4 subjects? That could happen as well. I don't know why you'd be part-time at high school, but potentially if it's university or something like that. Now, what you do is you create something else. Now, you've got the size of the array. So as soon as I initialize subject 1 to be maths, I increment my counter. So what I do is I create a counter. So what I set is I set a variable called num subjects. Now, to start off with, before I've added any subject, I set the number of subjects to be 0. So when you initialize the subject, you're going to say maths, position 0. You're then going to increment subjects to 1. Then it's going to be English. You're going to increment the subjects to 2. So now, let's say in total we do maths, English, and IT, the only important subjects. And okay, fair enough. Science. We need science. Science is important. And perhaps EGD then.
Accounting. That's getting too hard.
And then, I can't do accounting. Okay, now, so if we've got that, and we put it up to five subjects. When we're now looping, these are the only subjects we do. When we loop, where do we stop? At the size of the array? We stop at num subjects. So now our num subjects is the variable that keeps track of where we are at as far as number of subjects. Yeah. No, you can't do that because you have to, with using an array, you have to set a predetermined maximum. You have to, unfortunately, with an array, you have to set a maximum size. And that's why a list, there is no maximum. It's like the idea of data types. If you have a int data type, there is a maximum. The maximum in Java or newer versions of Java is insanely big. But it's like, there is a max. There's a maximum number of 64,592,000, or I don't know what it is, but Google it. And I think that one day I did actually spend some time going through the different data types to see the different max sizes. Because there's a specific reserved memory location or amount of memory for that data. So if there's a specific size, there is going to be a limit, isn't there? Whereas with a list, the one points to the next, which points to the next, which points to the next, which points to the next. And that's why a string works. A string works like that. So there is no maximum size of a string. Whereas in data storage, you would often set a maximum text size in that data storage. So you would maximum allowed to store 200 characters or 70 characters, whatever it might be. Does this make sense? So the same thing here, you have to set a maximum size. Now, realistically speaking, you could set you could do that, but that's a bit overboard because subjects, no one's going to do like you would have the company would have a predetermined maximum. Like for example, no pupil is allowed to enroll in more than 15 subjects, which is crazy a lot anyway. It would probably be a maximum of 10 at a high school level, or 9 or whatever it might be. So in this case, I'm just going to set it to be 10, just for interest's sake, and also obviously the marks would have to be. But then what I would have to do is private int num subjects. So I'm creating another variable. Now, with this, as you call the constructor, you also need to set it to be 0. Because to begin with, there are no subjects. So you have to initialize it. If you do not initialize it and you refer to it, you're not going to be able to work with it. Does this make sense? You guys follow? So if I now delete this, I could also technically do this because you're always going to start off with 0. Does that make sense? Logically speaking, this is more a proper way of doing it. However, you would not be marked wrong from doing it here because that just means for all your constructors it's going to be initialized to 0. Yeah. You can't declare something twice. It will tell you, like for now example, if I say now int num subjects, it's gonna be slightly tricky. The reason why this is declared as a field. This is declared locally. So what happens is that this one hides that one. So when I just say num subjects, I'm referring to this one. And you can check that. Well, here you're just giving it a value. You're just changing the value. But here I'm declaring a new instance with the same name. Now, the reason why I did that, I couldn't do that up here. I couldn't go private int num subjects because then it's going to say, hold on, that object's already defined. You can't define it again. But yet I can in my constructor. And the reason why is because this one is referring to, you get a local variable and you get a global variable. Now the local variable is referred to here. But now ironically it's the same thing what happens here with name. This name is the local variable, but when the computer's made it this dot name, it's referring to the global. So this dot num subjects would be referring to the field, yeah.
So if you really set a global variable, you could have many different inside different.
You could declare different variables there, but you're confusing it. You generally would only do that when you're trying to change or using sets as a get. Yeah. So you could have multiple chromosomes, but now I think that's just getting too confusing. I dropped the microphone. I'm hearing. I didn't even anticipate that.
Welcome back, Richard.
They've gone away.
Hello, future me. Oh, that's so cool.
No.
Think about it. Like, I will be talking to myself in the future.
Hello, future self.
Hello, future self.
Yeah.
Study.
Stop getting distracted.
The lottery numbers are.
No. Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if you'll be able to know the future self.
What are the lottery numbers?
You could ask.
True. There was okay, side note, I'll pause the video for the side note.
Oh.
So, we've got the counter to keep track of where we're at. Now, remember, a for loop is used when it's a predetermined number of times. But is it a predetermined number of times now?
No.
It's no longer a predetermined number of times, it's a undetermined number of times. So we have to use a different loop. Now, and also we're not going to be able to use, what did I just do there? I don't know. We're no longer going to be able to use the same item. So now, I'm going to create a string, and I'm going to call it subjects. Alright? Now, subject, this is the current subject that the user is entering. And I'm going to make it equal to blank. And I'm going to say while subject, now here's slightly confusing, dot. Dot is very confusing. Now, remember, a subject is a class, so I am going to be calling a method in the class. And one of the methods that we're going to be calling now is dot equals. And all dot equals does is it compares this string to another string. Now, in Java, normally, if you're dealing with data types, I would compare subject like this, equals to x. Now, it's not going to give me an error. This is what they call a logical error, meaning that it is sound. I can compare subject to equal x because both of them are strings, so therefore I can compare them. But here's the big difference. Subject has a reference of the word subject, and it contains a variable. So let's say here's my character. I'm just going to call it a character array, though technically it's a list. And it's going to contain in there x. Okay? Whereas if I then have the text x, that's just got x, and that's in a temporary memory location. There is no reference to it. So it has no reference, and it's in a temporary reference position over there. Now, does this here, so let's just say these two here, that I'm going to highlight now, equal to that there? Do they equal each other? Even though that both are x, they don't equal each other. Because this one is in a different RAM location. It doesn't have the reference. It's not an instance of the string class. Well, it is, but it's a temporary one. It's not being referred to. So therefore, they are not equal to each other. Therefore, I can't compare them like that. It will never ever exit because it will subject will never ever equal x. And I think it'll even tell me comparing a string using equals. You should not do that. So it does indicate to you that.
So would you be able to say you set a specific subject to the last subject? So yada yada yada.
That would be confusing. Also, if you like, for example, in this system where we want a variable number of subjects, people might be doing different degrees of different courses, or for example, different first languages. So you're saying you wouldn't do that. All you would do is you'll get the user. What we're going to do is we're going to go and say to the user dot equals x. Now there's equals and there's equals ignore case. Obviously, a capital X and a small x do not equal each other. But if you say equals ignore case, they will. Does that make sense? Now, all we're doing here is we're going to ask the user, please enter your subject. If the subject is x, does that make sense? Now, in this situation, we've got a little bit of a problem. Because now I'm going to go, subject is equal to, that's not how you spell show input dialog. What was that? Show input dialog, enter your subject. Or x to exit. Okay? So that's all you're going to ask them. Now, right now, I want to exit this loop. If the user presses, now this is the logic that was explained before. If, for example, now the user enters x on the first iteration, it should exit. I don't want to store x into subject. So technically, I should ask the user before whether he should go in. And then only after I've added the subject should I then ask again, shouldn't I? Does that make sense? Now, that's one way of achieving it, but one of the pupils the other day, a couple of years ago, said to me, well, it's like going to a coffee machine and going, no, I don't want coffee, and then walk away. And it is kind of that possibility. But even a do while, you don't have anything to put in there at the first place. So yes, this is the structure we're going to go through, because we're going to ask the user for the first subject, and we're going to input the first subject. And yes, we've got the possibility of the user going X and then exiting before you've even entered any subject, so the user does no subjects, which is a possibility, but that's then dumb user. If you wanted to, you could actually just not let the user know that is equal to X. So you just ask them to enter the first subject without giving them the option of exiting, and then you could potentially do a do while. But then that's and then you could do a do while, which means no matter what, this would at least occur once. So no matter what, this will occur once. The user's got no choice to exit when they first enter on. But I'm also quite happy for you to have left it as the user has to at least choose once. Can exit. They can run it and then exit without choosing any subjects. Whereas this would allow them to exit only after they've at least input one subject. Does that make sense? Yes. You 100% you could. And the reason why, and that's then in system design process, you choose how you want to do stuff like this. But I mean, technically, when you get to graphic user interface, you'll just have an option saying add subjects, and we'll just add it. So you would add the subjects individually, or you would read them from a text file or a database or whatever. And then when you create a new user, they'll input as many subjects as they want by clicking add or whatever. So yes, during system design process, you can choose different ways. The reason why I'm going this way is purely to show you the different types of loop. We've done a for loop, so I don't want to now examine a for loop again, or show you how to do a for loop. But you are 100% right. During system design phase or structure phase, you can work that. But certain problems you have to solve like this. But you need to know different ways you solve or different loops that you do. Now, this is quite complex. There's two loop statements that we've got here. We've now got a do while and a while loop. A do while will at least occur once. No matter what, it will occur once. Whereas a while could potentially exit on the first loop. Okay. Now, here, we're going to add the subject. So now how are we going to add the subject? We're going to say subjects. Sorry. Now, what position are we going to add it to? Do we have R? But what have we replaced it with? Num subjects. So we're going to say num subjects is equal to subject, so what the user's entered. The user's entered the subject at once. Does that make sense? And then what we're going to do is go num subjects plus plus. Which all that's going to do is it's going to increment this. So the first subject the user enters, so when he enters maths, num subjects is 0. So subjects position 0, add maths. Num subjects becomes 1. So it's referring to the next position in the array. Now, guys, this is a complicated concept, and we're going to practice this just now. But it is such a vital concept up until matric level, and quite frankly, if you guys get this by the end of this term, I'll be ecstatic. Yeah. You literally just increment the positions you're in. So like here, you would start off by having num subjects at 0. The user enters maths. It would be added here. Does that make sense? Num subjects would increment to 1. Now when the user enters English, English is not equal to X, right? So if I go through this loop here, let's actually see if I can't have them both next to each other. Let me minimize these things. Okay, so let's go through this. Let's do a little bit of a flowchart. Okay, we've got a variable num subjects. Num subjects is set to 0, right? Set subjects, I create a temporary variable called subject. You following? On my temporary variable called subject, the user goes to option pane or shown dialogs that asks the user to enter a subject. Give me a subject that the user enters. EGD. Okay. Now it enters EGD. So what happens is at position num subjects becomes a subject. Then next line num subjects plus plus. So num subjects become 1. Then it asks the user again. That's what this does. It says enter subject. So give me another subject. Okay, now maths is entering the subject. Does subject equal to X? No. So it's going to exit the loop. Fail on our part. I did it the wrong way around, right? Because it's only while that's true, then that's going to be false. So what I should have said is not. So what I'm saying there is subjects equals, ignore case X, not. My bad. So not equal to X. Does that make sense? So I forgot about that. I wasn't thinking at the time. It happens quite often, sadly. Anyway, now maths is not equal to X, so therefore it loops again. So it starts the do again. And subjects position num subjects, which is here, right, is equal to subjects. So this becomes maths. Now it asks the user again, enter a subject. They enter an IT. Is IT not equal to X? True. So it becomes here. User now enters in, so it will then add it to there. User now enters in X. Is X not equal to X? False. Exits the loop. So, sorry, I forgot to increment this. This would be 3. I forgot to increment the 2 times going on there. In the loop, I did that, but I didn't do this. But you guys get that that would be 3 now, the next position.
What if they put something down that has X in it, but not the whole word?
This refers to if you say equals, it means that the whole thing has to be equal to X. So unless there's a subject at your school called X, you're in trouble. But yeah, so it has to match the whole entire character. There's actually something that's called contains, which means it just has to contain that character. But in this case, equals means the whole thing has to be equal. Alright, now, on this sense, this will now loop until the user enters. Do you guys get that? But now we're going to have to change, and I've gone through that over here, so you guys understand how it works on the RAM, hopefully. Now we're going to go through how we do the rest of our code. Because now we've got our set marks. But now technically set marks is easy, isn't it? Because set marks, we already know the number of subjects. So obviously the marks are going to be the same as the number of subjects, isn't it? So we are going to loop until num subjects. And num subjects, we're then going to ask the same thing as what we've done here. We're just going to say that. No worries.
Yes.
There's no need to that. That's all we needed to change. We just needed to change that we would only loop up until a number of subjects. Yeah.
So if we loop, but then if we loop again, we can go subjects change what I'm trying to do.
No. First, it does set subjects. Set subjects will then, you haven't created it in a thread. And if it was created as in a thread, it would cause an access violation because then you're calling stuff that can be changed elsewhere, blah, 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 blah. But in this specific instance, set subject occurs first. This completes, the total number of subjects is now known, and your subjects array is completely populated. You then run set marks, so num subjects would have already been predetermined. So in this case, it would be, in this example, it would be 3. Then it would loop 3 times and ask for the marks of those 3 subjects. For get average, what would we change here? Do we loop up to subjects.length? What do we loop up until? Okay. Now, we go further down. Do we divide by marks.length? We go by. Here, do we do subjects.length?
So this is just kind of replacing those length methods with the variable.
Yes, because now the length is pretty much variable, yes.
So every time that it's introduced, so it exit off of every loop with the change to one subject. So you change one subject to 3. So now once you do 3 times, then you change to 4 and you do 4 times.
No, because it won't be, again, it's got to do with sequence.
So the whole
set subjects is done. Like remember, in your TBR, your text-based interface, I initialize pupils. The first thing that occurs, now, it happens in order. Unless you create a thread, which we potentially will teach you in grade 11, but it's not part of syllabus, that's more extra cool stuff. But unless you create a thread, your program will happen in the order in which it's occurred. So I'll get to your question now. So the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to declare pupil P, and it's going to initialize it using the constructor pupil. So the next thing that's going to happen is it's going to go this dot name is equal to names, num subjects that. It's going to then run set subjects. Set subjects is then going to increment num subjects. This is going to complete, so then the subjects array will be completely populated, and num subjects will become 3. Num subjects is now 3. Does that make sense? It then goes back, it finishes here. So after set subjects has been completed, so all of this has been done, it goes back to here, goes to the next line. It would then run set marks. So num subjects is now 3, so this will loop exactly 3 times. After this is completed, this would have been completed, so then it goes back to what called it, which was this. It then runs system.out.println p.toString, which would then call the toString method, which would run up and which would loop until num subjects, which is 3, and then add it to the string and display it. So it doesn't happen out of order. So only after we initialize everything first, so num subjects is 3. Only if we call the method again, or to add more subjects, would we actually worry about it having to loop a different number of times. Does that make sense?
Object-oriented programming this to me, in my mind, now we can scratch for one big loop and
no. Whereas you can basically look at it, remember in Scratch you had a broadcast and wait function, which means it would call a method in another thing, so it would call a sequence of events in another sprite. And then only after that's completed would it continue with the current code segment. It's the exact same thing here. It calls, a method is called, only once that method has been completed would it go back to where you were. Does that make sense? So it's very much like a broadcast and wait. You had a question?
If we were to learn some extra stuff outside the incoming class, would be able to use them in final exam?
No. You could use it in your final project and it would be encouraged. However, in your guys' exams, in your instructions, there's a very important instruction there that says algorithms are solved using first principles. And what that means by that is, for example, like a sort method or a whatever algorithm, you get classes that allow you to just go array.sort, and it sorts it for you. which means you have to have no understanding of loops or anything, and it's basically showing, oh, well done, you could use someone else's class I created, but you show no logical understanding of the concepts. And so there you would be given 0, because you have to do it according to first principles. But now, in saying that, that doesn't mean you can't use a loop that maybe something's been that we don't know about, like or that we haven't seen before, and we will look into it. But you can't use other people's classes which have been created to make certain things easier, but then it shows no understanding. Does that make sense? So yes and no. You use it for your PAT, which is your project, but you're more limited in your exam on what you can use. Okay. Moving on from that. So we loop until num subjects. Do you guys want to check that this runs? Okay, so let's do the example that we've got. We have maths as our first subject. So I'm sure I set this to be my... Damn it, my thing reverted to be the way it used to be, which is annoying. Which means it runs in the... Okay, I'm not going to change that on record. So the first subject is... No, it's EGD in this case. Okay, so EGD, it's then going to increment to 1. Okay, I'm going to have to do this, sorry. It's my main display is set to be dashed every single time it moves back to the main display, which is then my wrong display, so it's not displayed on the video, which is annoying. Which technically is my bigger, better display, but it's not recorded. Not important. Anyway, now the next subject is maths. The next subject is RT. The next subject is X. Now it says please enter mark for EGD, so let's say 70, enter mark for maths 75, RT 92. Okay. Now what you'll check there is it's now coded EGD 70, maths 75, RT 92, averages 79%. Craig got the highest mark for RT, achieving 92. So it's working extremely well. And it to the number or whatever number we enter, because we've got a control variable that determines the number that of items we're entering. Do you guys get that? Last brain mulch for today is, this is annoying, isn't it? Subjects, marks. I've got 2 different arrays to work with 2 different things, which is just annoying. And it is not a correct way of coding. It's not proper object-oriented programming. What you would do is you would create a class called subject. Your class called subject could have a field called name. Sorry, it shouldn't be a capital letter, small letter. Name. That's not an int. And it would have a... I would then create a constructor, fully parameterized constructor. I would then create a setters and getters, all of them. I could also create, for example, a just a parameterized constructor. You guys know how to do all of this. Alt insert is what I'm doing. And I could, for example, create a toString. I could also create a toString. And in my toString, I could then go name plus a tab plus mark. Voila. Now, before I continue with this, I'm going to create a copy of this. And I'm going to call it underscore whip, which means that it's going to be proper whip. Before I actually do this, because I don't want to overwrite the memo, because then that's not the memo if I do it like this. So let me close all these.
You're welcome, YouTube.
Okay. Now, what's going to happen here is we're deleting this. Sorry, we're not deleting this. Instead of having an array of, in our pupil, instead of having an array of subjects as a string, an array of marks as an int, we create one array of the subject class called subjects, new subject. Does that make sense? Now we don't need the marks array, but this is going to change slightly. Instead of saying num subjects is equal to subjects, we'll have to do this slightly differently. We'll have to also ask for the mark. So we're going to have to say here int mark. So exactly what we did down here. We're going to have to ask up here. So we're going to say string s mark enter mark for num subjects are. What we won't need to do, we just need to say subject. Integer pass and s mark is equal to that. I'm just going to create a temporary integer called int mark. Now, sorry guys, I apologize. I'm coding and I'm not explaining properly. I do apologize for that. Let me just quickly finish it, then I'll explain it properly. Basically, what's happening now is I ask the user for the subject. I then ask the user, please enter the mark for that subject. Does this make sense? I will then say mark is equal to integer.partial int s mark. So I'm just changing what the user's entered from a string to a numerical value. Make sense? I then say, instead of going is equal to whatever string, I say is equal to a new instance of subject. So all I'm doing is, like in my TBI, I created an instance of pupil called P, and I initialized it with the constructor. The same thing I'm doing here. Every single position in the array, I'm just initializing each new position with using the constructor. Does this make sense? I then increment the number of subjects. I then, in my subject, I then ask for the subject again. If they enter X, there's no need to ask for the mark, does it? Because X is exit. So you don't want to ask for loop. So this loop structure has kept that well. So the order of events is going to make sense. Do I need set marks anymore? No. Do I need, so we can delete that over here as well. Get average is no longer that. This is now going to be a little more complicated, isn't it? I'm going to go subjects position I dot get mark. Done. Now, so I'm just saying get marks from position subject. So you just use a getter and setter. Both of them are stored in a single array now, instead of two arrays that each position refers to the same, which is bad logic, and it makes your life very complicated. And same thing here, get highest. Marks position I is greater than here we just go again, subjects position I dot get mark. Here instead of marks position I, we go subject position I dot get mark. And here we are trying to get the name, so here we've got to go dot. So you have to refer to the specific dot getter, dot set, dot get. So get the name when I want the name, but get the mark when I want the marks. Now it's a more complex data structure. It's just not, we're not referring it to directly. We have to refer to it. Refer to first the class instance. So in this case, subjects position I. We then have to refer to the getter to get the specific value or field of that instance we want. Same thing with here. Marks position I. Now this is going to be much easier. Check this out. Done. Wow. Yes. Marks is part of subjects. And remember, if I do just subjects position I, it automatically calls a toString. And what does the toString actually do? It puts the marks and the name and the mark with the tab in between. So I don't need to refer to both of them. I can just refer to the one. So what's happened is, instead of having two arrays, one of a string data type and one of an int type, I've got one array of subjects, and the subject class has both the name and the mark.
Memory management.
Now, when I now press play, you will see absolutely no difference from what we did last time to now. So if I it was EGG first, sorry, and then it was maths, and then it was, oh yeah, good point. Okay, I'll speak about this error just now. Okay, so now it's the order is our first. Okay, so it's maths, and what do we get for maths? 70. Well, I've swapped my order now. EGD, we got let's say 75. RT, we got 92. X, voila.
what was the mistake.
No, well spotted there. Okay, so it says Craig. Let's figure that out.
Let's see, 70% for Craig.
Oh, subject name mark. So in other words, what's happening here? Oh, guys, look at this. When I initialized it, I sent through name. What should I be sending through?
Not there.
Subject.
Yeah.
So I sent through my name for every single one of them. Thank you for pointing that out. Hey, I got a 92% average for Craig. Okay, so that's not a failure.
I guess you could say that's a Craig.
Well, now check this. Here, the user made a mistake. Okay, and I'm thinking I should not go through this now, or maybe I should.
Just tell us. Just don't
So, there's like 5 minutes left.
If
Please don't blow out.
If I say RT and I said the mark, gosh, 72. Program ends. We're doomed. Now, the way you solve that, I entered a string instead of integer. The way you solve that is you can do the following. You highlight this, and you go and you say, okay, surround with a try catch, which is not there. Bad try catch. Okay, I'm going to highlight this whole thing and see if I can do it then. I want to try catch. Surround with. Can anybody see a try catch there? There we go. Try. There we go. Yay. Okay, so you can say, even with probably when I highlighted that, I just wasn't looking properly. You could highlight this area here, and then there's an option there saying surround with the try. Now, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to highlight the whole thing and surround the whole loop and surround by a try. Now, what this means is it is going to try do what it's doing here. And you'll see it automatically adds 2 catch statements there. Now, what the 2 catch statements there are confusing, but what the 2 catch statements there are, it's going to try do this. If there's an error, this is how it's going to handle it. And the first error is a headless exception, which I have no idea what that is, but it sounds funny. Which means that it's going to, if it's missing a head, it will do that. The second one is a number format exception, which means that you're trying to convert a text into a numerical value, but the format is wrong. So this is a potential error that could happen in that code that I've highlighted. So we're going to catch it. And when it happens, what do we want to happen? For example, I could display to the user option pane dot show message dialog. That is not a number. Please enter the subject and mark again. You idiot.
Can you imagine if programs
Now, basically, when I now run this, you'll check, when I press play, I'm now going to enter an RT, and I'm going to put the subject as 79.33 and a third. Okay, and I click OK. You'll see it'll say there, that is not a number. Please enter the number and mark again, you idiot. And then it'll ask me for the, oh hey, it'll ask me for the subject again. That's quite clever. Okay, so it just asked me for the mark again. That's cool. So now I can say 72. I'm just going to exit directly, and you'll see it works fine. So now, because I've enclosed it in a try catch, this is what is called error handling. Now, error handling is a big element in your guys' projects and stuff like that. When you create a program, you've got to anticipate that the user is dumb. It's basically the same when you ride a bicycle or a motorbike on the road. Expect that no user sees you, or no driver sees you. Yeah.
See another. Craig, IT and algorithm. There's only one. I'm being an idiot.
I only entered one mark in that case.
What would the program do if you had IT and English and you both had 72?
The average would be 72.
No, what would the highest mark be?
The first one, IT. And the way we've coded it, that is a good question. What would be the highest if there were 2 marks the same? Here we've just coded it, so only if it's greater than max. Then, so which means the first one that got that value would be the one that is returned. To code something in, you have to keep track if you've got more than one subject as the maximum subject, would be another ball game entirely, but that's future problem. I'm gonna stop the video, and I just want to just chat about this a bit more. So you can say goodbye.
Bye.